I don't think anyone ever imagined the wealthiest man on the planet would wind up in a courtroom like your average guy off the street, but that's exactly what happened. Elon Musk walked into that courtroom under the unflinching gaze of Judge Roberts, and you could feel the tension humming in the air. Outside, camera flashes lit up the courthouse steps like a red carpet event gone wrong. Protesters and fans had crowded the sidewalks, their voices blending into a loud, messy chorus of chants and demands. But inside, all attention was fixed squarely on one man, Musk. The whole scene felt like something straight out of a legal thriller. Reporters were hammering away at their laptops, trying to keep pace with the gravity of what was unfolding. The court officer held his position like a statue, and right at the center sat Judge Roberts, stern, laser-focused, and clearly not there to be impressed. His reputation in legal circles was no joke. The man didn't tolerate nonsense, especially from those who thought they could play games with the system or hover above the law. And Elon, regardless of his fame or fortune, wasn't getting any special treatment today. When Musk entered, there wasn't a trace of his usual smirk. No cocky tweet or wink to the press. He looked composed, serious, maybe even a little subdued. Wearing a sharp navy suit that probably cost more than my car, he gave a small nod to his legal team and took his place at the defense table without a word. No cameras were allowed inside, but you didn't need footage to feel the pressure in that room. It was thick enough to cut with a knife. This wasn't about some tech deal falling apart or a slap-on-the-wrist regulatory fine. This was bigger. This was about holding one of the most powerful men in the world accountable. Judge Roberts had summoned Musk to face accusations that, if proven true, might completely reshape how billionaires are held responsible under the law. The charges were still under heavy debate, but they centered around using his influence to disrupt the market, misleading investors, and dipping into behavior that wasn't just legally questionable, it was ethically shady too. When the court clerk called the session to order, Judge Roberts leaned in, his eyes sharp as a blade. "Mr. Musk," he said, calm and deliberate, "you may hold great influence in the world outside, but in this courtroom, that influence holds no weight." You could hear the collective gasp ripple through the room. Musk didn't flinch. His lead attorney, an older gentleman with silver hair and the calm presence of someone who's fought 1,000 battles, stood and introduced the defense. Judge Roberts didn't react. No smiles, no nods, no warmth. Just silence. This wasn't the tech world anymore. This was a federal courtroom. And the judge was here to prove that no matter how high you climb, the law can still reach you. As the opening statements kicked off, it was obvious the real drama was just getting started. But nobody, and I mean nobody, could have seen how intense things would get. By the time it was all over, Elon Musk would be led out of that courtroom by order of the very judge who was now staring him down. And what Musk said right before leaving? That would stop everyone dead in their tracks. The room shifted from tense silence to quiet murmurs as the prosecution rose to speak. At the head of their team was Barbara Robinson, calm, composed, and with a kind of intensity that didn't need to raise its voice to be felt. This was the moment people had been waiting for. What could possibly bring someone like Musk to this point? What was serious enough to get a federal judge this involved? Grant stepped toward the jury with confidence, her tone measured but razor-sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this case isn't about brilliance or success. It's about responsibility. It's about what happens when unchecked power turns into something dangerous." Without even glancing at Musk, she motioned toward him. The defendant is accused of intentionally stirring up the stock market, not just through business moves but by using his public platform to spark volatility for his own benefit. Screens flickered to life around the courtroom, displaying a trail of digital evidence. Tweets, some vague, some straight-up bold, lit up one after another. All of them had been posted by Musk during key financial windows. One tweet, in particular, grabbed everyone's attention. "Thinking of taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured." Most people had seen it before, but today it wasn't just some viral post. Today it was evidence. "Maybe it looks like a joke at first glance," Grant said, pointing to the tweet. "But that one message moved billions. Some folks made a fortune. Others lost their shirts. And Mr. Musk?" He sat back and watched it all unfold, fully aware of the storm he'd kicked up. She then brought out internal emails from within Tesla. Some were filled with confusion, others with flat-out panic. Employees didn't seem to know anything about this supposed plan. Some worried they might end up on the wrong side of the law. Those emails, loaded with concern, were now front and center as part of the prosecution's case. But market manipulation wasn't the end of it. The case stretched further into whispered rumors that had now been given form. Allegations surfaced about Musk's backdoor conversations with government officials, subtle nudges toward policy decisions that would conveniently benefit his businesses. There were notes, half-documented meetings, and text messages that hinted at influence being used behind the scenes in a way that made people uncomfortable. Judge Roberts didn't say much. Every now and then he raised an eyebrow, but for the most part, his expression stayed cold and unreadable. Even so, the weight of what was being presented couldn't be ignored. Musk, for his part, barely moved. He sat quietly, his eyes scanning everything, as if mentally calculating every piece of evidence like it was a math problem he needed to solve. Then came the real shocker, an allegation that Musk had accessed sensitive research from a smaller company he owned and used that data to influence key decisions at SpaceX. These decisions, if true, could have impacted national security partnerships. That part of the case was still under investigation, but just hearing it spoken out loud sent a chill through the courtroom. The jury looked shaken. You could see it on their faces. The crowd outside the courthouse was getting louder by the minute, and news alerts were firing off faster than they could be read. The prosecutor wrapped things up with a line that hung in the air like smoke. This case isn't about punishing success. It's about preserving integrity. No one, no matter how smart, how rich, or how admired, is above the law. What followed was the kind of silence that presses against your skin. Heavy. Unsettling. Elon Musk lifted his head slowly, not to glance at the judge, not toward the jury, but right at Barbara Robinson. The look he gave her wasn't loud, but it crackled with something powerful like thunder about to roll. As soon as the prosecution rested its case, low murmurs began to ripple through the courtroom like water lapping against a dock after a stone's been thrown. Everyone's attention shifted to Musk. You could feel the collective breath being held, like we were all leaning in to find out, would he just sit there behind his legal team, quiet and guarded? Or was he actually going to speak? Then, against all expectations and clearly not part of the original plan, Musk stood up. Even his attorneys looked surprised. Judge Roberts arched one brow. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, his voice even, "are you requesting to speak?" "I am, Your Honor," Musk replied, steady and clear. "If the court will allow it." That was rare. In a high-stakes case like this, letting the defendant speak off the cuff was like handing them a live grenade. But Roberts gave him the go-ahead. It was gutsy, risky even, but that's Musk in a nutshell. He stepped forward, no notes, no screens. Just him. And when he turned to face the jury, the whole room held its breath. "I'm not a saint," he began, voice low but packed with weight. "But I'm not the villain here either. You could have heard a pin drop. Sure, I've said some things, bold things. Some were meant as jokes. Some were dreams I was hoping to pull into reality. But none of them were lies told with the intent to mislead. They came from a place of risk. Of vision. Sometimes desperation, the kind that drives change when nothing else will." He paused, letting it all sink in. "I tweet the way I think, unfiltered, impulsive, maybe even foolish at times. But in a world where CEOs hide behind corporate statements and PR filters, I chose a different path. I chose to speak directly to the public, to investors, to anyone who'd listen. That's not manipulation. That's transparency." People in the back leaned forward in their seats, fully hooked now. "If I'm guilty of anything," he said, his voice rising with conviction, "it's dreaming too big. Believing that one person, one group of people, one company could help move humanity forward. Did I disrupt markets? Yeah. But not for greed. For progress." Then he turned to Judge Roberts, not confrontational, but honest. "Your Honor, if this court is here to punish audacity, then fine, I accept that. But if it's here to prove I acted with criminal intent, to show I abused my power, then I'm not your guy. I've been misunderstood." His lawyer finally rose, stepping in to handle the formal rebuttals. They started walking through the claims piece by piece. That infamous funding-secured tweet, backed by active conversations with foreign investors, maybe jumped the gun, but it wasn't made up. The emails from inside Tesla? Sure, they showed confusion, but not outright denial. Context mattered. The allegations of using classified data from a smaller company to influence SpaceX? Completely unfounded. No agency had officially confirmed it posed a breach of any kind. As the defense pushed back, something shifted. You could feel it in the air, like the courtroom had transformed from a place of procedure into a kind of stage. A tech analyst even live tweeted. Musk just turned the courtroom into a TED Talk. Meanwhile, outside, the crowd had doubled. Protesters and fans mixed shoulder to shoulder. Some waved signs reading, "Free the future," and "Innovation is not equal to crime." Others shouted for accountability. The street had become a collision of ideals. Inside, Judge Roberts held steady, unmoved on the outside. But anyone paying attention could see it, the slight tilt of his head, the furrow just starting in his brow. He might not have been swayed, but he was listening. Then Musk did something no one expected. He turned not to the judge, not to the jury, but to the gallery. The public. I might be the one on trial here, he said, voice echoing in the quiet, but so is the idea that boldness should be punished. A collective gasp swept through the room. Musk sat back down, folded his hands, and that was it. The courtroom, once a place of strict legal battle, now felt like something much bigger, a battleground between the safety of rules and the danger of vision. The silence that followed was deep. Not just quiet, it was reflective charged. Judge Roberts, a man known for being unreadable, suddenly looked different. Not shaken, but maybe just a little uncertain. His hands rested on the arms of his chair, and for a long moment he didn't speak. This wasn't the first time he'd seen a billionaire in his courtroom. Far from it. But Musk wasn't like the others. He wasn't just playing the corporate game, he was rewriting the rules as he went. And now he was standing in front of the very system he claimed to be trying to change, asking for it to understand him. It made you wonder, could a man like Judge Roberts, known for his logic and impartiality, be swayed by vision? By charisma? By someone who genuinely believed they were building the future? Outside, the media circus had reached fever pitch. Satellite trucks lined the street. Reporters swarmed like bees, recapping every word Musk had said. News segments couldn't keep up. Some called his speech a PR masterstroke. Others said it was emotional manipulation at its slickest. Still, in the noise, you heard voices of admiration too. Folks who saw his speech as more than strategy, as something that tapped into people's deeper hopes. The courtroom had become more than a legal space. It was now the epicenter of a cultural clash, law, innovation, and public opinion all crashing into one another. Social media lit up. Hashtag Musk for freedom. Hashtag disrupt the court. Forums exploded with debates. Was he a hero trying to break free from a rigged system, or a reckless billionaire who had gone one step too far? Back inside, Judge Roberts lifted his eyes from his notes. He looked straight at Musk, and for just a second, the tension broke into something more human. This wasn't just about a verdict anymore. This was about the kind of legacy the court would leave behind. Because whatever decision was coming, it wasn't just going to affect Elon Musk. It was going to shape how the next generation of visionaries, the bold, the brilliant, the boundary pushers, would be judged in the eyes of the law. By the time we hit the final stretch of that trial, the courtroom didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It had turned into a full-on ideological battleground. You had the old-school legal system squaring off against a man who, for better or worse, represented the future, a walking symbol of ambition, disruption, and tech-fueled revolution. The prosecution didn't waste a second after Musk's passionate speech. They came back hard, steady, and sharp, reminding everyone that charisma doesn't cancel out consequences. Their message was clear. Musk hadn't just stirred the pot, he deliberately misled investors, manipulated stock prices, and shaken the economy to its core, all to serve his own self-interest. They argued his tweets weren't random brain dumps. They were calculated, reckless acts that destabilized the financial system. But the noise outside the courtroom was impossible to ignore. The hashtag Elon trial was blowing up all over the world. You had celebrities, influencers, former employees all weighing in. Some were rallying behind Musk, saying his kind of boldness was exactly what the world needed right now. Others were calling him out, saying that genius or not, no one should be immune from accountability. Back inside, Judge Roberts was starting to feel the full weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just about one man anymore. He was making a call that could set the tone for how society handles powerful disruptors in the years to come. Could someone like Musk, a man whose ambition constantly pushed the boundaries, ever truly be held within the limits of the law? Then came the day everyone had been waiting for, verdict day. You could feel it, a heavy, almost suffocating anticipation hung in the air. The room was packed. People barely even breathed as Judge Roberts walked in. All eyes were locked on him, waiting for the words that would either cement Musk's downfall or give him a second wind. Musk sat still at the defense table, a picture of calm. His face gave nothing away. Despite the public backlash, the protests, and the media-feeding frenzy, he'd never wavered. His legal team had portrayed him as a misunderstood trailblazer, a man trying to move the world forward in ways the law hadn't quite caught up to. His supporters believed that too. They held on to hope, bracing themselves for what came next. Judge Roberts cleared his throat and began. After thoroughly reviewing the evidence, the testimonies, and all arguments presented in this courtroom, he said, voice firm, this court finds Mr. Elon Musk guilty of financial manipulation, insider trading, and associated offenses. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Musk's supporters looked stunned, frozen. Those rooting for accountability let out a quiet sigh of relief. For a moment, it felt like justice had been served clean and final. But it wasn't over. The judge continued, his tone shifting. However, he said, considering the unique context, Mr. Musk's contributions to space exploration, renewable energy, and scientific advancement, as well as the absence of direct personal harm, the court has decided against incarceration. Instead, Mr. Musk will serve probation under strict conditions. The room didn't move. It was like everyone was stuck in place, trying to make sense of what they'd just heard. Musk wasn't going to prison, but he wasn't walking away untouched either. His name had taken a hit. His reputation, something he'd built as much with vision as with steel and circuitry, was now scarred. And that scar wasn't going to fade anytime soon. But just when we thought it was all wrapping up, the unexpected happened. The double doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open, and in walked a young woman, someone no one recognized at first. She moved with purpose, her face calm but determined. It didn't take long for word to spread. She was the anonymous whistleblower, a former insider from one of Musk's own companies. She had stayed silent through the whole trial until now. "I have new evidence," she said, voice trembling only slightly. The room froze. Every head turned. You could feel the air get sucked out of the place. She stepped forward, holding a thick stack of documents, and handed them to the judge. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't dart. She knew exactly what she was doing. Everything ground to a halt. No one knew what was in that stack of paper. But everyone knew one thing, whatever it was, it could blow the case wide open. It could reverse everything. Or make it far, far worse. Judge Roberts looked down at the documents, scanning the pages with a mix of surprise and suspicion. The courtroom, once again, was teetering on the edge. Musk's defense team scrambled to react, already sensing the threat. They didn't even try to hide their alarm. And just like that, the whole atmosphere changed. Tension gave way to uncertainty. Order dissolved into chaos. The trial that had gripped the world wasn't over after all. It had just taken a turn no one had seen coming. What did those documents hold? Were they going to clear Musk's name, or bury him even deeper? All eyes were now on that one stack of papers. Everything that had been said, all the judgments made, every emotional speech and counter-argument, they might mean nothing now. The courtroom sat at the edge of a cliff, ready to tip over into a brand new storm of revelations, secrets, and consequences no one had prepared for. And as for Musk? Well, his journey wasn't over. Not even close. Judge Roberts looked different. The usual cool confidence he carried around like armor had slipped. His hands trembled just slightly as he flipped through the documents the whistleblower had handed him. I'd never seen him like that before, not once during the entire trial. The man had always seemed unshakable. But now? He looked like someone who just realized they were holding a live grenade. Musk's defense team was already in a huddle, whispering urgently. You could tell they knew whatever was in those papers had the power to change everything. Either it would clear Elon completely or send him crashing even harder than anyone thought possible. They didn't waste time. They tried to get the judge to toss the evidence out, calling it irrelevant, unverified, maybe even fake. But Judge Roberts wasn't biting. We'll review the contents, he said after a long, tense pause. Court will recess briefly so both sides can examine these files thoroughly. He gavelled the room to order and called for the break. But nobody left their seat. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Then the woman, the one who'd turned the whole trial upside down, finally stepped forward. She was young, confident, and spoke with a calm you wouldn't expect from someone carrying that kind of bombshell. I worked for Elon Musk's companies, she said, her voice steady. I was part of the teams building his most ambitious projects, and I had access to the data, the communications, the back end of everything. There was no hesitation. She wasn't reading from a script. This was real. What I discovered, she went on, completely shifts the foundation of this case. The prosecutor leaned in. You could see it in their eyes, they already sensed the gravity of what she was about to say. She explained that some of Musk's biggest innovations, the stuff that had made headlines around the world, self-driving breakthroughs, battery patents, even certain rocket guidance systems, weren't as original as the public had been led to believe. She claimed that a lot of it had been copied. Worse, stolen. The real originators? Smaller firms, independent engineers, overlooked inventors. All allegedly buried under NDAs, acquisitions, or flat-out manipulation. And that wasn't even the worst part. According to her, Musk had also used non-public information, internal reports, confidential forecasts, to move his investments around like chess pieces. He made decisions based on knowledge only a handful of people could access. It wasn't bold risk-taking, it was insider trading. And it had cost thousands of small investors everything. The courtroom exploded. It was chaos. Everyone was talking at once, journalists scrambling to write, lawyers panicking, people in the gallery gasping. Even Musk's usual stone-cold composure cracked. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor, eyes fixed, like he was trying to disappear into it. His legal team looked like they'd been hit by a truck. All the careful groundwork they'd laid out, the inspiring narrative, the brilliant misfit defense, was unraveling right in front of them. Judge Roberts flipped through the documents again, slower this time. The lines on his face seemed deeper now. He didn't say much, but you could feel the shift in the room. Musk's empire, the one built on rockets, electric cars, solar panels, and moonshot dreams, it was teetering. And the whole world was watching, waiting to see if it was about to collapse. When court resumed, the room still hadn't caught its breath. Conversations buzzed in hushed tones. Everyone was trying to make sense of what had just hit them. You could feel it, that rare moment when something truly historic was happening right in front of you. Judge Roberts raised his gavel again, and the room went still. "We will now proceed with closing statements," he said, his voice controlled but heavy with the weight of what had unfolded. It wasn't the same courtroom anymore. What had started as a high-profile financial case was now something much, much bigger. This was turning into one of the most consequential trials the tech world, maybe the world in general, had ever seen. The defense was clearly rattled. They did everything they could to poke holes in the whistleblower's claims. They said the evidence was fake, taken out of context, the work of a bitter ex-employee. But they didn't sound convincing anymore. The jury could see through it. So could the judge. So could we all. Then came the prosecution's final blow. "This isn't just evidence," the prosecutor said, stepping forward. "It's proof that Elon Musk, a man idolized by millions, built his empire on half-truths and behind-the-scenes manipulation. This isn't innovation. It's exploitation. And now it's time the truth comes to light." Every word hit like a hammer. Musk sat back, eyes dim, and finally broke his silence. "This is a setup," he said, voice thin but defiant. That familiar edge of arrogance flickered back to life. "I built everything from nothing. These claims are false. And I'll fight them. Every last one." But you could tell it was too late. Something in the room had shifted for good. The jury wasn't buying it. The weight of the evidence had crushed the illusion. They went off to deliberate. Hours passed. Felt like days. The courtroom emptied and refilled. Reporters whispered updates. The tension never left. When the jury returned, the room locked into place. You could have heard a pin drop. The verdict came fast. "Guilty," the foreperson said. "On all counts, fraud, insider trading, and intellectual property theft." The courtroom went completely off the rails the moment the judge read out the sentence. You could feel the weight of it settle in the air like a thick fog. Elon Musk, once the golden boy of tech, a symbol of innovation, stood there watching everything he'd built start to fall apart right in front of him. The trial didn't just lay out the charges and violations against him, it peeled back the layers of the carefully polished image he'd spent years crafting. In the blink of an eye, he'd gone from high-flying entrepreneur to a convicted felon, and it looked like there was no coming back from it. In the days that followed, the media ran wild. News anchors couldn't stop talking about it, and the headlines were brutal. Elon Musk's fall from grace. Meanwhile, social media was lit up with hot takes. Some folks were heartbroken, others gleeful, and plenty just stunned. People were asking the big questions: was this the final chapter in Musk's reign over the tech world? Could he somehow bounce back and clear his name, or was he about to pay the full price for everything he'd done? Then there was the whistleblower, the young woman who decided to speak up. To some, she became a symbol of courage. To others, she was a lightning rod for controversy. Either way, her choice to come forward didn't just steer the direction of the trial, it might have shifted the trajectory of the whole tech industry. One thing was undeniable: the ripples from this courtroom drama were going to be felt for a long time. Elon Musk's downfall wasn't just a personal crash, it was a wake-up call for anyone who thought power and money could shield them from accountability.